What's the creepiest thing you've seen other families do? Not safe for work. Viewer discretion is advised. Please do like, share, and subscribe. My next-door neighbor's wife never comes outside. I was pulling into my driveway one afternoon and glanced over at the husband walking into his front door. It was pitch black in there at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Pitch black. Every day. I only see him leaving and coming, and I never see his wife, ever. She doesn't work, so she's home. But in all the 4 years I've lived here, I've never seen her come outside. Maybe she's super reclusive, but I sometimes wonder what the hell kind of life she lives in there. I was friends with this girl when I was 13. Me and her were best friends, and every Friday night I stayed over. I loved hanging out with her older sister and mom and considered them my family. Then my friend's biological dad got out of jail. He would beat up on my friend's mom constantly. When my friend would tell me, I was shocked that this was happening. Apparently, her mom and dad had been on and off since high school, and it always would end with him going to jail on drug or domestic abuse charges. I never saw him hit her until one Friday night. I heard glass shattering. She broke his favorite cup by accident. He went full-on psycho. He was beating her, throwing her into walls, and finally trying to smash her face with a hammer. I ran to my friend's room and was about to dial 911 when my friend stopped me, telling me there was no point to call. Her mom would take him back and she'd be mad we got him in trouble. Actually, she was scared he'd kill her and her kids, but we didn't know that then. My friend was just on her phone while her mother was being beat within an inch of her life in the next room. I'm thankful that he stopped when he did, or else she would have died on the floor of her kitchen while her kids were watching a movie. He left after he was done hitting her. When I ran up to her, I was sobbing. I kept telling her how sorry I was I couldn't stop him and that I loved her like a mother. She just kind of looked at me and bawled. She finally called the police on him after that, and they caught him drinking and driving. On top of domestic assault, he was sentenced to 22 years without the possibility of parole. Bye. Had a friend named Kent in 4th grade. His family was messed up. His mom was in prison for trying to kill him and his little sisters by locking them in their house and setting it on fire. Kent saved his sisters' lives but was burnt on 90% of his body. He had masks, special sleeves for his legs and arms. It was horrible for him. Other kids were weirded out by him, but I thought it was so unfair how kids treated him because they didn't understand. Hell, my own stepmother had beat the shit out of me 100 times by that age. But what happened the one night I stayed over at Kent's house will forever be etched in my mind. It was a normal weekend night. We had a Super Nintendo, a large pizza, Pogs, and a whole basement to ourselves. We eat, drink, play, till we pass out. In the middle of the night, his little sister comes running down the basement steps crying hysterically and peed herself and is shaking, having a full-blown panic attack. Once I wake up and see Kent is not waking up, I realize upstairs sounds like a bowling alley or a bar fight. I can't get Rose to calm down, and Kent won't wake up, so I go searching for an adult. Up the basement steps is the dining room, and as I open the door, I see Kent's dad and his new wife covered in blood, cocaine, literally trying to kill each other. Neither really had clothes on, neither noticed me, and they were out to kill each other. What did I do? Turned around and went back downstairs and sat with his sister until she fell asleep. Woke up the next day, and they acted like nothing happened. The house was cleaned up. Both of them looked well, better than the night before. Served the kids donuts like it was any normal Sunday morning. I told my dad every detail of the story when I got home, and he looked sick when I was done. He went and told the story to several people who ended up finding out Kent's dad was a fairly big-time drug dealer and woman beater. Kent moved away shortly after that, and I've never heard a thing about him since. I still wonder to this day if him and his sisters are okay. And that's the story of the weirdest shit I ever saw another family do. Got plenty more stories, but that one bothers me most. I worked in a mental health unit, and there was this guy, probably 18 or 19, who had a really weird relationship with his mother. Like, both parents obviously had spoiled this kid rotten, but the mom-son relationship was especially weird. The mother literally sat in the middle of our day hall with her legs like wrapped around her son, who was sitting cross-legged in front of her, giving him a massage. Both parents were super touchy with the kid, kissed each other on the lips. I don't think this one is super weird in all contexts, but in the middle of the psych ward, it was weird. Hugging and touching constantly, just bizarre. When I was a kid back in the early 80s, my brother and I were around 6 and 8 years old. There was a family that lived 2 blocks down with kids the exact same age. We used to play, but my mom was very strict that we had to always leave by a specific time. This was the early 80s, and parents just weren't too strict about when kids had to get home. But if we were going to this house, Mom was rather adamant. It was even weirder because every time we went to leave, the kids would beg us to stay. It got a little weird, and all I remember is we just quit going over there. A few years back, I asked Mom about that and why that family was so weird. Apparently, the time we had to leave was generally right before their dad got home from work. Dad was mean, angry, and a raging alcoholic. Those kids got the snot beat out of them every night, but always in a way that it was hidden by their clothes. If we were there when Dad got home, the beatings got delayed until we left. My mom apparently found out about it after their dad beat one of the children to death, and the abuse became common knowledge. But prior to that, Mom said she just had a weird vibe about the dad and didn't want us around him. Used to live next to a very strange family. There was a girl my age who used to peek through the curtains and watch me mow the lawn. I never saw anyone from the house outside except for rare occurrences and always at night. I didn't know how many people lived there, but the few that I saw were as pale as ghosts. They had a beautiful brick patio with a built-in fire pit, built and only ever burned cardboard boxes and plastic. The patio was never maintained and got overgrown the same year it was put in. Only time I interacted with them was to repeatedly ask them not to burn plastic in their fire pit. They would wait for a nice cool night to burn their trash, and it was always when I had my windows open. I used to live a few houses down from a home that had no windows, like it looked like the house had been built that way since the siding was pretty much seamless. Like it didn't look like they had removed the windows and boarded up or anything like that. And the family that lived there, the random times that I did see them, which was super rare, they would come out totally covered in clothes, like long shirts and pants and gloves and everything, and always with hats of varying sizes. I ended up finding out that they had a skin disorder, where they were basically allergic to light or something like that. So it went from creepy to pretty interesting when I found that out, LOL. But before that, I avoided that place like it was cursed. I dated a girl, Mandy, in high school, whose neighbors looked like an average middle-aged married couple. They didn't have kids, but had 2 little dogs they treated like kids, dressed them up, took them around town, talked to them like they were talking to a kid that understood, that kind of stuff. We just figured maybe they couldn't have kids, so no big deal, and kind of felt sorry for them. Other than that, they looked like a very loving married couple. Walked around with hands in each other's back pockets, always saying I love you, that sort of stuff. Years later, I bumped into Mandy and we talked for a bit. At one point, I brought up the neighbors and their dogs, and she got real serious. She found out a couple years after high school that they weren't a married couple. They were brother and sister. Okay, this is my own family, but a pretty weird thing. My family, extended included, really likes to hang around cemeteries a lot. Bored? Let's go to the cemetery and walk around. On a car trip and need to stretch your legs? Cemetery. We even had picnics in cemeteries. I have a lot of distinct memories of my mom, aunts, and grandparents taking me and my cousins to get McDonald's or pack a PB&J for a cemetery picnic. We'd just spread out a blanket and eat lunch next to literal dead people. We were never disrespectful of the graves or anything. Just imagine going to a funeral and seeing a random family having a picnic there. I didn't realize this was weird until I was talking with my fiance about places we could take our food outside, and I was like, ooh, there's a cemetery over there we could sit down and eat at. And this man gave me the most WTF unsettled face I've ever seen. I thought about it for a minute and came to the conclusion that I might actually be the Down the block from me, when I was around 10, was a family with 2 kids, a daughter my age and a brother a few years older. Once during a slumber party, they admitted they practiced kissing and more on each other, so they'd be good at it later. When they started dating, it was never clear just how far they went with each other. The parents were also a bit weird, insisted serving us all giant heaping spoonfuls of vitamin powder, or else we weren't allowed to eat dinner, and putting milk on cereal would earn a grounding. Only apple juice was allowed, even though milk was otherwise consumed in normal ways in their house. Being grounded sometimes meant being locked in a dark room with the light bulbs removed. haven't thought of this in years and am shuddering now thinking about it. Guy in high school I played football with was close with his mother to a creepy degree. He had a party at his house one night, and his mother was out trying to be the cool mom, having drinks with people. At one point, he ended up doing a body shot of tequila off his mother. Not sure what happened to that guy. I'm sure he's now living in a house with a headless doll collection and a few guests in the basement. A kid I went to school with used to kiss his parents and sisters on the lips. Not like a peck, but like a kiss with passion. They did it in public, so it wasn't like I spied them doing something I wasn't supposed to see. Dad included. Really awkward. I grew up in Southwest Florida. Off the MLK and Michigan Avenue, an apartment had a Christmas tree up all year round and no doors on bedrooms or even the bathrooms. The girls were only allowed to wear skirts. They looked like dolls. I was 6 at a friend's and I was terrified. So there was this guy in my class called Lawrence. I was actually quite good friends with him, though he had a few mental disabilities such as ADHD, dyslexia, and maybe autism as well. I don't know. He always got in trouble, but he was generally a nice kid if you could get around his outbursts. He used to come round mine a lot, and because his family wasn't as well off as ours, his clothes were always dirty and unclean, but my mom would accidentally spill something and then give him some of the old clothes as well as washing his clothes to ensure that he had at least some clean ones. No big deal. Well, one day, I went round his house and it was fun. We played board games as they didn't have a TV and the house computer was bricked. Their house was also extremely messy, but I never mentioned it. However, I accidentally wandered into the wrong room after getting a drink of water and saw Lawrence's mom, his dad, and his older brother all having sex. Also, bearing in mind that his brother was only about 14 or 15 at that time. Me and Lawrence were about 7 or 8, I can't remember exactly. Then the brother saw that I had saw them as I locked eyes with him. I immediately went back to Lawrence, who looked none the wiser, and then I immediately got distracted and forgot to mention it to Lawrence. Then the older brother, a couple hours after, told me not to tell anyone, especially not Lawrence or my mom. Of course, I ended up telling my mom, and she ended up calling social services, and they went immediately into the care system, with the parents both sent to prison. I found out years later, after I found Lawrence's older brother on social media, that the parents had been raping the brother, and he apparently was cooperating with the parents so that they didn't rape Lawrence. My friends in college, we'll call him Bob, never talked much about his family. I could tell he had some money, but as a lower class goof, I wasn't really sure how much. All I knew was Bob had 2 flat-screen TVs and had this sort of carefree attitude about his, like, he never worried too much about anything. One day, he asked me to ride with him to pick up his family from the airport. I was worried because the flight was due in 15 minutes and the airport is 45 minutes away. But we didn't drive to the big airport. We drove to the little municipal strip right outside of town where Bob's family's private Gulfstream was taxiing toward us, the family crest emblazoned on the side. Bob's family owned and managed a $56 billion hedge fund. I wondered why Bob drove his F-150 like a sports car and finally got my answer. He had learned to drive at 16 in a Ferrari. I eventually visited one of their homes and it was like a museum. Another home was previously owned by a legendary superstar rock star. Another home was on the Bahamian island. Next to the island was their 185-meter yacht. The creepiest thing about this family was that to this day, they were the kindest, nicest, sweetest people I've ever met. The whole family was polite and respectful to one another. The kids really loved their parents, and the parents really cherished their own children. To someone like me, a low-class boob with schizophrenic, drug-addled parents who were always poor and gambling, it was too much. I used to babysit my neighbor's kids every weekday during the summer from 8 to 5. The girls were 4 and 6 months and pretty easygoing kids. The parents paid well and were really nice people. One Friday, though, the mother asked me if I could babysit Saturday night from 5 p.m. until 1 p.m. the next day. I told her sure and showed up at 5 the next day. Everything was fine. I ended up sleeping on the sofa. I woke up at 8 a.m. to her husband sitting on a chair in the living room just staring off into space. I felt really uncomfortable and said, "Hey, I thought I was working until 1. He turned his head real slow, looked at me and goes, "No, you can go." I asked him where his wife was and he said, "She'll be here soon." He sounded so monotone and had absolutely no expression. The girls' rooms were upstairs and you could see their bedroom doors from the living room. He just kept staring at them. I don't know why, but I didn't feel comfortable leaving them alone with him, so I woke them up and just started making them breakfast. The man did not move or talk, just watched me. He eventually said, "You can leave. I'll still pay you for the hours we originally agreed on." I texted my mom and told her, "Husband's home, he's freaking me out." My mom walked over and his attitude changed. He went back to being the typical happy, friendly neighbor that I first met. After some casual conversation, my mom told me it was time to go. Husband was home. The guy paid me and we left. Soon after, I saw the mother pull into the driveway. My mom told me I was overreacting and he wasn't acting weird. Yeah, because the minute she walked in, he flipped a switch and went back to being normal.